And that concludes questions for oral answer. Would some honourable member care to move that the House take note of miscellaneous business?
Mr. Speaker,
Order.
I so move.
Tracey Martin.
To order, Mr. Speaker. So I rise on behalf of New Zealand First in defence of Alfred Nader.
Order. I can accept some interjection through a general debate, but it is unreasonable the amount of interjection at the very start. The member can start her speech again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I rise on behalf of New Zealand First in defence of Alfred Nader, because somebody has to. It is interesting, it is shocking to see how Alfred Nader has been hung out to dry by his own political party. No senior member has been placed next to a new minister to support him in a situation where Mr. Nader, unfortunately, a character flaw he has is he's too honest. Mr. Nader should be given a vote of thanks by all members of this Parliament and by the people of New Zealand for telling the truth. Mr. Nader has sat for 6 years in a caucus where this behaviour of threatening NGOs, of suggesting that people should not criticise the government or watch out, of suggesting that if people want contracts with this government, there will be clauses that say you will be gagged. Mr. Nader saw this on a daily basis for 6 years, and all he did was articulate it because he's an honest man. But where are his colleagues now? Where are his colleagues now? Only a few months ago he was one of the three amigos. Now he's on his own. And let's just go through some of the things that Mr. Nader has already seen. For example, Health Minister Mr. Coleman decided that if you criticised his health policy, you were a raving lefty. Conservation Minister Barry calls people who bad-mouthed dock underfunding nutters. Yeah. Contract drilling, a contractor who has drills holes at Pike River has had a gagging order placed inside his contract so that if anybody contacts him with regard to what he's doing on site, particularly the media, he must alert Sonnet Energy. The Right Honourable Winston Peters and fellow MPs of mine went to Kaikoura 14 days ago because they had been contacted as elected members of this Parliament by constituents who were concerned about the slowness with regard to the reconstruction there. Now, NZTA then calls up the helicopter company and wants to know who hired the helicopter. What on earth makes NZTA think they have the right to ring up a commercial operation that has been hired by a private organisation and ask who paid the bill? They believe they can because that is the sort of practice that this government allows to happen. Now, it goes on though. Last week, New Zealand First emailed the St John's to ask about the new crewing proposals that this government had announced. The St John's came back in an email and said, what do you want to know for? Well, actually, we want to know because we want to know the government has announced it, so we're just looking for the finer detail of it. But when they replied to us, they CC'd in the Ministry of Health. They CC'd in the Ministry of Health. So I find it very interesting. The Minister obviously agrees it's normal practice for this government because she's ranting on about it. Or like social providers, that social housing providers have been told that if they get approached by the media, they need to contact the Ministry immediately. They're not free to speak. They're not free to speak. Now, in Northland, 2 years ago, Whangarei MP Shane Reti was phoned up a resident and told her, you better stop complaining about your dusty road or you won't get it or nothing will happen. Unfortunately for him, Unfortunately for him, she actually recorded the phone call. What about the solo mothers that Paula Bennett, once they criticised a policy, ended up with their private data all over the internet? What about when the Human Rights Commissioner criticised John Key about increasing spy powers and he threatened to cut their funding? What about Salisbury School when Hekia Parata lost a court case and since then she's been starving them to death? Mr Nauru merely did what he was taught to do. Mr Nauru nearly articulated what he had seen being done. Mr Nauru should be supported by his colleagues. It is a shame. It is a shame that you do not stand by your colleagues. But let it be a lesson to all of you backbenchers. Make one mistake and your party leaves you alone.
The question is the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Moving aside now from the hysterical, shrill nonsense